Hey y'all, it's me, Dirty Lola, and I'm coming to you live from Please an Educated Sex Shop in Brooklyn, New York. And we are back with the second episode of the Sexual Pivot Chat. Joining me to my left.
Hi, y'all. My name is Valentine. I'm a sex educator and kink educator based here in New York. I've been in the biz for almost 20 years. Wait, maybe
No,
longer,
longer than that.
longer than
Yeah.
that. I just really love teaching people how to have better, more fulfilling sex and to connect to their sexual journeys. You can find me online at vibing underscore with underscore V. And I'm really excited for this conversation.
I am Carly S. You could find me on the internet at Makeup and Sin. I also run the blog Dildo or Dill Don't, where I write about reviews and guides and anything else that pops into my head. I've been in the industry about 15 years and I love teaching pretty much the same thing. Valentine is someone that trained me in the industry, actually, so I learned from the best. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
that's it.
And I'm Dirty Lola, sex educator based in Brooklyn. I'm an edutainer and I teach and do workshops for young adults and adults. And I also do lots of media things like appear on Netflix, HBO, Vice when it was around, and also YouTube, like now. Welcome. So you can find me at Dirty Lola on Instagram, and you can find Please also on Instagram at Please NYC. And also shout out, I forgot to do this, but shout out to Magic Wand for these amazing, I'm doing this, amazing Magic Wand microphones. They're so cute. They're so cute. And they're real. We're really
Yeah, this is really a microphone.
it's really this is fluffy. It's not the silicone. Yeah, it's great. All right, so we're here for our second episode of the Sexual Pivot series. And today we are going to be talking about The Sex Lives of African Women by Nana Darkoa Sekiyima. I did it. Okay, I practiced a little bit and then I wanted to make sure I get it right. And today, answering the prompt will be Valentine of I want you to talk about your sexual pivot. What is the sexual pivot in your opinion? And what's the difference between a sexual pivot and an awakening?
Thanks, Lula. Sorry. Um, for me, I think the idea of a sexual awakening is that moment where you kind of realize who you are as a sexual being, what you're interested in your early kind of discovery of your sexual self. Whereas a sexual pivot is more like actually understanding your desire is something that's changing and meeting that moment and kind of having moments of adjustment, redirection, and like further self discovery. So, an awakening is kind of like an aha moment of like, I'm a sexual being and this thing might be pretty cool. Whereas a pivot, I think, is meeting your changing body where it's at.
I love it. So, more about this book. It's a collection of intimate real life stories from African women across the diaspora, and it explores themes of sexual liberation, cultural expectations, queerness, polyamory, and healing from trauma. I think the thing I loved about this book, not think I did love about this book, is it's different stories. And I'm a big proponent of storytelling as a teaching tool because I think you learn more when you can connect with the thing and it's coming from a person versus just like it being given to you as like a fact, a matter of fact thing. So having all these different stories about different journeys and to different parts of sexuality was really interesting, and I think it's going to help a lot of people who might come across this. Also, the fact that it is all African women, all Black women, which you don't normally see discussed. This is a rare book, sadly. There aren't as many books about sexuality that center on Black women specifically and talk about their experiences because it is very different for many different reasons. Do y'all have things you want to share about the book?
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you that having a book that has a collection of like a diversity of stories is really important, especially when it's like focusing on identity, because people tend to assume like different groups of people are a monolith, and that is something that we need to stay away from because just because you are in a particular identity doesn't mean that you're going to experience sex and sexuality and desire or have like kind of learn the same information about sex or about yourself as anybody else. Everybody's experience is really different. So, yeah, I think that that's a really good point that you brought up.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, you've summed it up really well. It's really nice to be able to relate to stories and have such diverse voices because it's not something that's well represented in any media, let alone specifically for Black women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was refreshing. I don't remember the exact person, but it was refreshing to read the parts about polyamory.
Yeah.
And like some of it, like I identifying with a bit of it, but also just this how we come to these things and how, especially for folks in the Black community, I feel like there's stuff that's happening that just never has a label. Like we have you have a bunch of uncles. There's somebody that's all around, or you have your aunt that has different folks. I mean, it also that's kind of the same with queerness.
Yeah.
Like that's always your aunt or your uncle's friend. They never say partner or boyfriend, at least growing up. And like so my mom was somebody who she had a roster before rosters. Like I remember all the dudes. I remember the face. They were lovely, but that was a roster. She had a roster, and I don't and it was non monogamy in a way. I don't know if they had a conversation about it. Like it wasn't picnic table, whatever, kitchen table. We weren't doing all that. But those were things that I realized growing up. I was seeing like all these different people in her life and how they attached to her and all these different ways. And some of it wasn't healthy. Some of it was definitely toxic. And then when I kind of came to my aha moment, which even my journey into polyamory was very not labeled. People were like, when were you polyamorous? I'm like, in high school? But I didn't call it that because we didn't have a name for it. I just had a boyfriend and a girlfriend, and that's just what it was.
I mean, I realized when I saw Jessica Drake talking about it in like an HBO Real Sex thing, and she was like, "I have a husband and a girlfriend." And I was like, "Oh, there's other people that like want to do this too." I was like, "I thought I invented it."
I love that you were not like, oh, nobody else is doing it. You're like, I invented something new.
Yeah, for me, it was more like I didn't have language around polyamory until way after I'd been doing it for a long time. But it was like I came into non-monogamy in the 90s, and it was like the hot language was open relationship, right? Which is a type of, it's under the poly umbrella or whatever, a non-monogamy umbrella. But there was also not a lot of resources, and there weren't a lot of role models, right? So for myself as a brown person, I was just kind of like, am I the only one?
Yeah.
And then come to find out, here we all are.
Yeah.
As my grandma would say, that's that white people shit, because that is what it was. The only people, I think back in the late 80s, early 90s, it was on like Real Sex, and it was always like white hippies living in somewhere in a treehouse. It was never anybody brown, never anybody black, and it was always like a very specific type of person. And you're like, oh, well, of course you live in a treehouse. Of course, this is the life you lead. These were the examples. And so when you even thinking about stepping outside of that, you're like, oh, is this supposed to be for me?
Yeah.
Right.
Am I allowed to do this? Is it indeed white people shit? Is it, or can I also partake?
I mean, even going to like swinger parties, because that was my real introduction to polyamory and like that sort of environment at all. Like it was white people shit. When I would go, my partner at the time was a black man and a white woman, and we would go, and people would see us, and they'd be like, they wouldn't treat us like people; they would treat us like objects, because we were like, oh, we want to sleep with that, and it's like,
the fetish.
Yeah, exactly. They would immediately fetishize us because like they couldn't tell what race I was, and they immediately saw that he was a big black guy with a big dick, and they'd be like, oh. This is who I want to sleep with. Plus, we come in already as a throuple, so they're like, "Oh, this is already set up to be exciting."
Yeah.
So like, everybody else there is white.
Yeah.
We're the only people of color there, and like they were also 6 foot and 6'5".
Mhm.
I was built like this as a teenager, like because
Same.
I was like 21 at the time. I think I just turned 21, so like I looked my best at the time, and like we got a lot of attention,
Yeah.
but you know,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing this book focuses on for me was how many stories talk about basically the entry into these identities and lifestyles that aren't. I don't feel like we get the easy way in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We
it's not welcoming.
and it not only just that, but it comes with all this extra shit
Hmm.
that I don't feel like a lot of white people, unless you're religious,
Hmm.
unless you have some added things to it that you have to go through. It's like the moment you're like, am I queer? It's you have to look around because you're like, well, who else is queer? Who
Mhm.
and now we have more. Now I feel like this which if there's young people watching this, you might be like, what are you talking about? But
Mhm.
we're all old, okay? We grew up in a time where we were still people still getting kicked out of houses.
Yeah.
I mean, that happens now, but it was rampant.
Mhm.
We were hiding it. We were maybe out of the closet in the streets. We was
Yeah.
gay in the streets,
Yep.
straight in the sheets. We were coming home and not talking about it because you had to tread carefully. Um, but it was just very different, like an entry point into all of these things. And when you're reading this, you realize like, oh, there's all these hurdles and barriers. So
Mhm.
first discovering something about yourself and then having to do like this extra homework of am I allowed, is this mine to have. A lot of it is like white people be introducing things again. I had a white husband, but also I was the gateway drug. I was the one who was I think, but he was the key. Like
Yeah.
he could go, we could go
Yeah.
places,
Mhm.
and I can be sometimes racially ambiguous. So you put me next to a white man, people don't know to get confused. And but that helped, right?
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
wasn't getting as fetishized as I think when I am solo, and people realize I am black or a person of color, and they're like, "Oh, I've never dated a black girl before." Okay, that's not. You want a cookie?
Mhm.
Like, what do you want from
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna say that the the other thing that feels really important about this book is like it is challenging the like framework and the lens that we get into any kind of like sexuality that's not white, because I think that so much of what's available to learn about polyamory, to learn about kink, to learn about queerness, if you're like looking for community, it's written by white people,
Yeah.
or at least what gets like
Push to the front.
pushed to the
Yeah.
front,
Mm-hmm.
exactly what gets the spotlight. Which is also why I'm really proud of this group here, where it's like actually what we do is create visibility and space for other people.
Yeah.
And Carly, in the last session, you were talking about like you like to overshare online,
Mhm.
and I think that that's really important because there's so many different things that we haven't heard from perspectives other than straight cis white people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that it's real. Like these are real people. These aren't people who, I mean, even us, we're real people, but we also are on a different level in the access we have to things. Like I have whole stories about clown orgies at the Venetian. You're never going to get that. Why? Because you don't know porn stars. I
Yeah.
do. So you like, and sometimes you end up in the middle of a giant bed watching people get balloon animal fucked. It's a thing. Right. We have stories that aren't of the normal. And so sometimes they're not as relatable when you're like, yeah, remember that time? So I love these because they're relatable. They really are talking about the
Average
breadth.
person.
Yes. And the
Yes.
breadth of like what it can look like stepping into these roles. And for me, especially as a survivor of sexual assault, like talking about how those things play in some of the mind fuck you go through when
Hmm.
you are stepping into kink or even non-monogamy,
Mhm.
because we are all told we're hypersexualized.
Yeah.
You're only kinky because somebody hurt you.
Yeah.
Hmm.
um and then you're having those moments of like, am I a masochist because my mother beat me when I was a child?
Right.
Like,
Mhm.
those
Hmm.
are thoughts that I've had to sit with and to
Yep.
think about. And so it felt good. Is that the word I want to use? But to read other people are having these same kind of
Yeah.
hurdles and thoughts that surround our identity, and just how people assume, especially like hypersexualization
Mhm.
of Black women, BIPOC folks, that we are just inherently more sexual deviant. We're more
Mhm.
just because.
Yeah.
Just because. Yeah.
Yeah, and like more available, I think. And
Mhm.
I think part of it might be from the perspective of like being in the sex industry where people do assume that they have more access to you because of that, but
Yeah.
also just like, yeah, racially and for me in particular, like just in terms of gender and like being trans and how much permission people give themselves to talk about trans bodies and
Mhm.
like if you look for porn that is like for me sometimes I'll be looking for porn that's affirming where I can see somebody who has a similar body to me reflected. It's like you're just gonna find a lot of shit that's like double triple fetishizing.
Yeah.
It's like
Mhm.
okay, this isn't written for me or
Yeah.
this isn't
Mhm.
It's not for your gaze.
Mhm.
exactly.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, in talking about just black bodies, especially in kink and going back to slavery and just how black women are seen as available property, you're clearly going to do this for whatever reason. I once had can we call him a man? A person, not really a man, whatever. Just in that he was a piece of shit. Write me the longest. I might have been the person who fucked up Okay Cupid for everybody and made it where you can't read your messages unless you like somebody back because I got a 6 page. I printed it out to see how long it would be. Basically manifesto from a dude who told me was saying all these hateful things about me, calling me all kinds of names, and said I would still fuck him because I was black and desperate, and
Wow.
it's bred in me to just give in to the white man. Like he wrote, and I had never said anything to him. This was just his hello. This was his like hi. And I sent it out, and I knew somebody at the time who worked, and I was just like, I just want you to know like what people are doing on your
Mhm.
website, and
Yeah.
that you don't make it easy
Mhm.
to like report people, but also like this dude does not need to be anywhere near any dating site ever
Mhm.
again. But that speaks to like how people are taught to perceive like the prejudices is also racism
Mhm.
Hmm.
around our bodies.
Yeah, and then add like living in a curvy body.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, and that is supposedly permission
Mhm.
because you're going like through things. Again, you talked about looking the way you looked.
Mhm.
Same. I had boobs in the 3rd grade.
Yeah.
I've been 5'7" most of my
Yeah.
life. Everybody always thought I was my brother and sister's mom, which really, y'all,
Yeah.
like 2 kids, like come on, I was like 13. But there's just this something the way people impress those things upon you, and so you're already dealing with all of that and then trying to find yourself in things. And
Mhm.
I remember getting into kink and starting to realize like, oh, I think I'm into submission,
Mhm.
but then having the whole like, I'm not calling somebody master.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I'm a masochist and I enjoy pain, but I don't want a white person ever whipping me.
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
having to have those things, but then also like meeting people like Melina Williams Haas,
Mhm.
and she turns race play on its head and talks about
Mhm.
deeply how, and I'm still conflicted about things, but it's just like everything has to be fucking homework.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, you're like, is this person really kinky or are they just racist?
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
like, ooh,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I guess this is a good segue into trauma. Talking about it, making a song of everything. Um, so trauma in all the different ways, but how trauma can dictate our journeys, like what you've gone through in life. For instance, again, being, having gone through childhood sexual assault really did change how I connected with people.
Hmm.
Mhm.
That even when I was, I guess my hypersexuality, because it is a thing, but it was for me, is why I'm a sex educator, because I just started reading everything.
Mhm.
I was curious. Things had happened and nobody wanted to talk to me about it because I was little. But I'm like, some stuff has already happened. Y'all better talk to me. I have
Mhm.
questions. And so I was a little kid. I found my grandpa's porn stash. And then I was reading everything. It wasn't just about the pictures. Like I was reading like the Penthouse Forum.
Mhm.
I read the articles because it was interesting.
Yeah.
And I remember I made like a little paper at school because I read the word cunt. And I went to school and I was like, what do you call yours? My mom makes me call it a cootie cat. And do you know the word cunt? And I like made hatch marks. I did an informal survey.
That's so awesome. What an
And-
educator from day
Listen,
one.
I wanted to know. And kids were like, but other kids were like, oh, I know that word. And we were like
Mhm.
at the lunch table, like, oh yeah, my mom said this, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
Having that kind of conversation. And that was where my like kind of hypersexuality manifested in that. And then when I started having sex, doing sex things, it took me I didn't have penetrative sex till I was 18. One, because I was like, my mom was gonna kill me if I get pregnant,
Mhm.
because she was a teen mom, and I was like, don't want to do that. And then two, I wanted, I felt sexual, but I was like, I don't know if I want you in my body, but like, can we do, I want to do weird stuff with you. Yeah, that was that kid. Like,
Yeah.
we were, like, I don't know. I wanted to try things, but I didn't necessarily want to have sex. And the boys were like, you want me to handcuff you, but you don't want to? I was like, yeah, let's make out handcuffed. Or, do you like feet? I don't know. I read something. I was like, let's try this out. Do you like this? I don't, that was me. I was always wanting to experiment, but sex necessarily wasn't on there because my body was still so affected by what had happened to me, but it
Yeah.
didn't stop me. It just kind of augmented how I went into things.
Yeah. I thought about this question a lot because it feels many layered, and part of it is that um, in my mind as a survivor and as a young person, I always thought I held a lot of shame.
Mhm.
Um, so I assumed that any kind of sexual desire was like too much. Like I
Mhm.
was like being like perverted in a way that it was way before I reclaimed that
Mhm.
term, you know. But wait, where was I going with this?
Perverted.
Perverted, thank you. But then, like, as I became older,
Mhm.
right, like, one of the reasons, so there's this, like, myth of, like, people who have been abused that's why they like BDSM.
Mhm.
And the
Mhm.
reason for me that I like BDSM and why I was first interested in it was, like, understanding this basis of communication and consent. That is like really a reclamation on how we experience touch and closeness in relationships, where like for me any kind of touch including non-sexual touch felt like so overwhelming, and
Mhm.
like there isn't even usually a moment of seeking consent where like someone will hug you or kiss you or hold your hand or whatever
Mhm.
the thing is. And BDSM actually provides a structure for that,
Yeah.
and you know, when it's good,
Mhm.
um, we create these parameters together and we negotiate, and then we know what's going to happen, whether it's exactly what's going to happen or loosely what's going to happen.
Yeah.
It gives you control and gives you your power back.
Yeah. BDSM is what taught me I don't have to, for the even the simple stuff, I don't have to let you hug me.
Yeah.
Or and also like, oh, you don't like to be hugged, why aren't you asking people? Like those were the things that started, it got me rolling in those thoughts of like, this can extend out into life in non-sexual situations. They don't have to be, it doesn't have to be just in the bedroom when you're doing things. That was super
Exactly.
important. Um, I want to talk about the sexual pivot, and in this book, I'm just piecing together a question while we were talking, but it's when the sexual pivot is happening while you're also having a sexual awakening. So going through a pivot because maybe age or body things, and then realizing I'm kinky, I'm
Mhm.
want to be in non-monogamy or something like that, and then having to deal with body things, body changes. What are your feelings on that?
I can start if
Yeah,
you want to
yeah,
think
go
about
ahead
it a
and
little
start.
bit.
Yeah.
So I'm actually experiencing that right now, right?
Mhm.
So I am trans and have been back on hormones for a little bit of time. And in that process, my body is changing very, very fast, right? And there's a lot of stuff that I have to do to like prevent like atrophy and to actually work with my body to like have hormone replacement,
Mhm.
maybe like that I wasn't expecting to have, so that like my mucous membranes aren't as like friable, or so
Mhm.
that there's a little bit more self lubrication happening. But at the same time, I'm discovering that like what I've liked sexually is also very different now,
Mhm.
right? So there's this deep desire to experiment in these new ways, and then there's that moment where my body isn't performing in the same way that it used to.
Mhm.
So I need to reevaluate my relationship to lube. I need to make sure that I do my hormone insertion every night. I need to um, try different types of vibration,
Mhm.
try new toys. I feel like my only constant has been, and not to be too much of a dweeb, the magic wand. But other than that, I think things are constantly changing. So, kind of lining up your desire in your brain and
Mhm.
your physical capacity, that's like a learning process. And it's something that you have to do by yourself so that you can communicate your desire to other people, but then also have like trusted and willing partners who are meeting to or willing to meet you there and go there with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned atrophy, and we were talking earlier about things that start happening to your body. Like, what was the lips?
Oh yeah, that as you get old, well, when someone with a vulva is born, you're born without inner lips, and a lot of folks don't know that when kids are growing up, like a lot of times, if their hands are in their pants, it's because it's either like painful or itchy, and like that's why little kids have their hands in their
Mhm.
pants. And as you get older, your lips are disappearing,
Mhm.
so you have to deal with that. And if you don't even know that's happening, or someone that's not even looking down there, you might not even notice. And if you don't have the knowledge to know that it's happening, like you don't know to ask your doctor, like, hey, like, give me some hormones to counteract that, or like, let me get some more lube so that sex is more comfortable when I'm having it because my lips are disappearing.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
They like Benjamin Button.
yeah.
It's like they're
Yeah.
not there anymore, and then suddenly they're going back.
Exactly. So like you, if you're not informed about these things,
Right.
you don't know to be aware of these changes, because why would you look for them?
And nobody is telling us, men. I just want you to know they're not giving us a book. The
Mhm.
doctors aren't bring. First of all, the doctors are fighting with us when
Yeah.
we're walking in and we're talking about
Because a lot of them don't know either.
They don't know, or the favorite phrase is, "You're not old enough to be going through that," and I'm like,
Yes.
"You are wrong,"
Yeah.
because you got a coat on and I don't,
Yeah.
and it's cold
Mhm.
in here to you, and I'm having hot flashes. So please, what can I do?
Well, I had a weird long COVID symptom.
Yeah,
Remember
I remember
when
that.
I had that? I was also going through hemorrhoid symptoms, and I had a weird like pelvic floor pain, and I was like, I think it's just my hemorrhoids. It wasn't.
Mm.
And I was like, what is this pelvic floor pain? And I just happened to mention it to my neurologist, and it ended up being persistent arousal syndrome, which like you go to a doctor, they're like, oh, lucky you, like you're turned on, but it's not a horny turned on sensation. It's that you have tension in your pelvis and it hurts. So you're constantly dealing with this pain in your pelvis that you can't do anything. And I just happened to bring it up to my neurologist, and he was like, oh, I know what that's related to. I can help you fix that. And he knew it was related to restless leg syndrome because
Mhm.
it has to do with nerve endings. And by the grace of God, I got a medicine that helped the pain go away. But then when the pain went away, I couldn't come.
Yeah,
So now I have no pain, but now I can't come,
right.
even with a magic wand.
Yeah,
And like that's the thing you tell people, like, oh, this is really strong. It'll help you even if you're on like SSRIs or something. And even with that, like I know my body, I know how to get myself there.
right.
That wasn't helping. So like I had to go now and be like, can I lessen this medicine? Can I figure out like how am I going to pivot, cuz I need to come.
Yeah.
Like that's part of how I keep myself, not running people down in my car. Like so like luckily like now I'm not in pain, but now I'm cranky
Yes.
cuz I'm not orgasming.
Yeah.
So like figuring that out was amazing. And like if you go online and you read, like most people are dismissed by their doctor because
Yes.
they're like completely uninformed about this and they don't know any way to fix it, because like most of the time what they do is they prescribe antidepressants because people are so depressed on them that they
Right.
kill themselves.
Yeah.
There's a huge suicide rate for that disorder because they're dismissed, there's no cure, and like that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that really ties into all of the, now that you've touched on COVID, but it's all of the gaslighting that happens,
Yeah.
not only with COVID, but like any kind of body stuff,
Yeah.
anything where you're like, I'm experiencing this in my body and I
Yeah.
know what I'm feeling.
Mhm.
And then medical professionals are often like,
That's not true.
that doesn't line up with the research. I
Or
saw."
God
Exactly.
forbid you're fat.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
yeah, they're like, you should just lose weight.
Lose
Yeah.
weight and then come back. Like,
Yeah.
friend.
Yeah.
Meow. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's there's so many things that I've learned the stuff you've gone through and other
Mhm.
friends, and I was talking about a friend who's going through having a full uteral prolapse. Like
Mhm.
all the organs are trying to escape the hatch. And she has to have
Mhm.
surgery. It's gonna be a whole thing. She has to be inverted. People don't know that people go through this because
Yeah.
we're not being given there's not like a list of stuff you could possibly going through. I feel like we got more help when we were kids. They were like puberty. I want that film,
Yeah.
but for menopause. I want
Yeah.
that.
Mhm.
Hi, you're turning 40,
Yeah.
and this, and welcome to perimenopause.
Mhm.
I want the like. Here are the things that can happen because I think it's important. If we are having to be responsible for ourselves,
Yeah.
how can we be responsible for ourselves if
Yeah.
we don't know
Because
what's
we
going
know
on?
because we're oversharers. We talk
Right.
to all of our friends
Right.
who hear these things from various different people that we're talking to, and we share, and then
Mhm.
we spread that information forward. But
Yeah.
if like you don't have access to like friends or community, like how are you learning this?
And the thread to tie it all up is
Mhm.
that even going through all of these things, even through aging bodies and all this stuff, I would say everybody at this table is still a pretty sexual being, and we're
Mhm.
learning how to pivot and how to get around the things. We're
Mhm.
lucky. One, we have
Mhm.
each other, but we have like
Mhm.
a lot of amazing people and resources.
Mhm.
Because that's the important part is like stuff's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Yep.
You're gonna go through body trauma and all kinds of things, but you got like figure out how you can keep going.
Yeah. I found a way to come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
tell
Yeah.
everyone the way I found.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. And not
Yeah.
to just, I mean, I'm not, if you don't want to keep having orgasms, that's you.
Yeah, that's fine.
But
If
don't
it's
give
not
up.
that important to you, then
Yeah.
it's not important to you. If it's not a priority, that's totally fine also.
Yeah.
Because if it's not a priority, then it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
But it was a priority to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You get to make these decisions for
Exactly.
yourself. Well, we are at the end of our time. Thanks again for joining us. You want to tell folks again where they can find you?
Yeah, you can find me online on any social media outlets at vibing_with_V.
And you can find me at Makeup and Sin or www.dildo.com.
And I'm at Dirty Lola on Instagram or dirtylola.co. And you can find Please at Please NYC on Instagram. Thank you.